From the very moment she stepped into that glimmering high-end restaurant, Ava had no clue she was barreling straight toward a life-altering collision with fate. Sitting at the wrong table might sound like a simple mistake, but for Ava, it ignited the most shocking, exhilarating journey she could never have imagined. In a single heartbeat, her ordinary life as a hard-working waitress collided with the secret world of an enigmatic billionaire. Secrets, betrayals, and unforeseen twists lie ahead, each chapter more gripping than the last. Will this unlikely spark blossom into a love powerful enough to transcend their differences, or will the truth destroy them both? Get ready to dive into a whirlwind of emotions, surprises, and heartwarming second chances as we unravel Ava's tale. If you're ready for a story filled with hope, heartbreak, and the unbreakable strength of love, make sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss a single riveting moment. Ava stepped off the crowded evening bus and smoothed the wrinkles from her simple navy dress, trying to swallow the knot of anxiety in her throat. The dress was several years old, bought secondhand when she needed something nice for her high school graduation ceremony. Its fabric was starting to show wear at the seams, and the tiny scuff marks on her low-heeled pumps reminded her just how seldom she splurged on new clothes. Tonight, though, she had decided to wear this dress again because she wanted to look confident, even if she didn't really feel that way inside. She paused momentarily under the bright street lamp to check her reflection in the glass window of a nearby closed boutique. Her wavy brown hair, pinned back on one side, contrasted with the thrumming lights of Crown City behind her. She had never dared to enter a restaurant this upscale, but her best friend Layla had begged her to give this blind date a chance. Layla's voice echoed in her mind. "Go, have fun, and at least get a free fancy meal out of it." Ava grimaced at the memory, her cheeks already warming. She wasn't really the type to date casually. She barely had the time. Between her long shifts at the Margot's Corner Diner and her after-hours attempts to create new sketches, romantic encounters had become the last thing on her to-do list. But Layla had insisted. "I'm setting you up with Liam's cousin. Trust me, they're lovely." Ava hadn't been able to refuse because deep down she yearned for some spark in her life. She had grown tired of her monotonous routine of waitressing all day, then returning home to a tiny apartment shared with her mother, who was struggling with health bills. A blind date, no matter how strange, was at least a break from the grind. Pushing through the elegant glass doors of the restaurant, aptly named Candelara, she was immediately greeted by the muted clink of silverware and hushed conversations. She paused by the maitre d's podium, feeling momentarily self-conscious. A swirl of well-dressed patrons cast curious glances in her direction, and she couldn't help but lower her gaze. The maitre d', dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, offered a courteous smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Ava managed, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm meeting someone. At table. She fished her phone out of her handbag, fumbling to open Layla's last message. "Table 8, I think?" she said at last, her cheeks coloring a bit. The maitre d' inclined his head. "Certainly, miss. Follow me, please." They wound through the warm, dimly lit interior. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lights were set low to create an intimate ambiance, and the plush carpeting muted every footstep. Modern paintings lined the walls, each strategically illuminated by a gentle spotlight. White tablecloths gleamed under the glow of small, flickering candles. The air itself smelled refined, a mix of subtle perfume, fresh rosemary, and buttery pastries from the kitchen. "Here we are," the maitre d' announced softly, gesturing to a round table set against the far wall. "Enjoy your evening." He bowed slightly and withdrew. Ava's eyes scanned the single occupant of the table, a man in a sleek black suit with neatly combed dark hair that looked as if it might have taken half the day to style. He was leaning forward, scrolling through something on his phone, and hadn't yet noticed her. Immediately, Ava's nerves flared. This must be him, she thought. Layla said he might be a bit reserved. Summoning her courage, she spoke in a friendly, slightly breathless tone. "Hi, you must be Oliver." That was the name Layla had texted her, the cousin of Liam. "I'm Ava." The stranger raised his gaze from his phone, surprise flashing in his greenish-brown eyes. For a split second, he didn't speak, which gave Ava just enough time to notice that he had a strong, angular jaw and a faint shadow of stubble that gave him a more mature look than she'd anticipated. He seemed about her age, perhaps a little older, but there was a calmness to him she couldn't quite define. "Hi," he finally said, though his tone suggested he was slightly confused. "Nice to meet you, Ava." His voice trailed off in hesitation, and Ava took this as a sign of shyness. She sank into the chair across from him, pressing her lips into a reassuring smile. "Don't worry," she said, determined to fill the awkward silence. "Blind dates are always a little weird, right? Layla warned me you might not be very talkative, but that's okay. I'm happy to chat enough for both of us." She placed her phone face down on the table, turned off the ringer, and clasped her hands in her lap, silently reminding herself to project as much confidence as possible. He seemed to collect himself, slipping his phone into his jacket pocket and offering a small, courteous smile. "I appreciate that," he replied. "Blind dates aren't exactly my strong suit. So what made you agree to this one?" Ava chuckled nervously, shrugging. "You know how friends can be pushy, especially once they're in relationships themselves. Layla is my best friend. She's dating this guy Liam, and apparently you're Liam's cousin. She's been after me for months to go out with you." "Right," he said, nodding in an attempt to hide a flicker of astonishment behind an understanding expression. Then he continued, "And you, what do you do, Ava?" "I'm a waitress," she replied, feeling that familiar twinge of embarrassment. She knew it wasn't the most glamorous job in a city as competitive and image-conscious as Crown City. "I've been working at Margot's Corner Diner for almost 2 years now. It's not exactly my dream job, but it pays most of the bills. Plus, I can fit my art in whenever I'm off." His eyes lit up slightly. "Art? That sounds interesting. Are you a painter, sculptor?" Ava smiled softly, realizing she liked the way he asked questions without judgment. "I'm into sketching and some watercolor painting mostly. My father taught me to draw when I was a kid, and it stuck. One day I'd love to have my own little studio, maybe even a gallery. For now, though, I guess the diner is funding my day-to-day life, and I do commissions on the side whenever I can find clients." He nodded, his expression genuinely interested. "That's fantastic. Everybody needs something that keeps them going, right?" At that moment, their server arrived with 2 glasses of water and a basket of fresh bread, placing everything gently on the table. Ava's gaze flickered around the restaurant, marveling at how each plate being carried out looked like an artistic creation. Her own stomach rumbled slightly, and she realized she hadn't eaten anything since lunch. Once the server departed, Ava said, "I hope you don't mind, but I'm starving. Maybe we can order and we'll keep talking once the food's on the way. This place is definitely out of my normal budget, so I'm excited to try something new." He offered a faint grin and nodded, still looking a bit uncertain, as though he was straddling the line between amusement and something else she couldn't read. But she appreciated that he hadn't called attention to her insecurities or made her feel awkward for not being part of this usual fancy scene. At the very least, she thought, Oliver seems polite. Halfway through the meal, which Ava found absolutely divine, her phone began to vibrate persistently on the table. Initially, she ignored it, not wanting to be rude, but after the 3rd buzz, she sighed and picked it up. Her eyes skimmed the illuminated screen, and she felt her heart jolt painfully. "Hey, Ava, I'm Matable 8. Where are you? Looking forward to meeting you in person. Oliver. Hey, Ava, I'm at table 8. Where are you? Looking forward to meeting you in person. Oliver. Hey, Ava, I'm Matable 8. Where are you? Looking forward to meeting you in person. Oliver." Her mind froze. She reread the message slowly, each word landing with a sharper sting of realization. "I'm at table 8, it said. But she was definitely not at table 8. She lifted her eyes in dawning horror to the man sitting across from her, who was neatly slicing into his entree. "Wait," she breathed, mouth going dry. "Your name, it's not Oliver, is it?" He paused, setting down his silverware. There was a moment of guilt that flashed across his features before he shook his head. "I'm afraid I'm not." Ava felt her cheeks burn hot, the heat spreading downward to her neck. She pushed back her chair and jumped to her feet. "Oh my gosh," she gasped, feeling utterly humiliated. "I'm so sorry. I sat down with the wrong guy. I don't know why I assumed—" She couldn't continue. Her brain was buzzing and she wanted to disappear beneath the polished wood floors. The man started to stand as well, perhaps to reassure her, but Ava was already flustered beyond words. She grabbed her handbag, nearly tipping over her water glass in the process, and bolted from the table. She thought she heard him calling her name or something vaguely akin to, "It's okay," but her ears were ringing too loudly to be certain. She practically sprinted out of Candelara, nearly colliding with another party coming in. Outside, the evening air felt cool against her burning cheeks, but it offered little comfort. She flipped open her phone and hastily texted Oliver. "I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. I'll be right there. I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. I'll be right there. I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. I'll be right there." But even as she typed, she hesitated. She was so mortified she wasn't sure if she could bear to go back into that restaurant. Ever. Nevertheless, she forced herself to walk around the building, peering through the tall windows, trying to spot table 8. A few minutes later, she located it near the opposite corner from where she had been. From a distance, she saw a sandy-haired man sitting alone, checking his phone. That's probably the real Oliver, she thought, heart pounding. And I just humiliated myself in front of whoever that other man was. Summoning courage she didn't feel, she went back inside and approached table 8. The real Oliver stood up with a worried expression. "Ava?" he asked softly, noticing her flushed face and trembling hands. "Hi," she managed, forcing a tentative smile. "I'm so sorry. I sat at the wrong table and..." Oliver frowned gently, as if sensing her discomfort. "No worries at all. Are you okay?" She nodded quickly, though internally she was a mess. For the next hour, she struggled to maintain polite conversation with Oliver, who was indeed Liam's cousin. He was considerate and kind, but Ava found herself replaying the earlier fiasco over and over in her head. Her mind kept wandering back to the surprise on that other man's face when she'd introduced herself so eagerly. By the end of the meal, Ava's nerves were still frayed. She politely declined Oliver's offer to get dessert, and they parted ways with a mutual promise to maybe meet up again. But she knew the date had been overshadowed by her mortification. As she stepped out of Candelara, she glanced around, half expecting to see that stranger again. A swirl of relief and disappointment filled her when she realized he was gone. That night, Ava returned to her modest apartment on the east side of Crown City, a cramped but cozy 2-bedroom space she shared with her mother, Darlene. They had lived there since Ava was in high school, but the rent hikes and Darlene's escalating medical bills made it harder and harder to stay. Ava let herself in quietly, not wanting to wake her mother if she was already asleep. The living room was small, its walls adorned with Ava's sketches pinned up in simple frames. A few old paintings by her dad, who had passed away when she was 12, occupied places of honor. She often found herself staring at them when she felt lost, remembering how he used to encourage her to chase her artistic passions no matter what life threw at her. The memory tugged at her heartstrings as she kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto their slightly battered couch. Moments later, the hallway light flicked on. Darlene, wearing an oversized sweater, peeked into the living room with concern etched on her face. "Ava, honey, you're back late." "Hey, Mom," Ava said, forcing a small smile. "Sorry if I woke you. I went on a blind date." Darlene's eyebrows lifted in curiosity. "A blind date? That's new. How did it go?" Ava's cheeks heated at the recollection of her humiliating mix-up. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. She launched into a short recount of how she'd sat at the wrong table, her confusion, and how she ultimately ended up meeting the real Oliver. The words tumbled out in a breathless rush. Darlene chuckled softly but then shook her head. "That sounds like a scene from one of those romantic comedies we used to watch," she said, her tone gently teasing. "But you're not hurt, and it sounds like you survived the ordeal." "Survived is the right word," Ava muttered. She gave a half-hearted laugh, then rubbed her tired eyes. "I just can't believe I made such a fool of myself. And the worst part is, the other guy was actually really nice." Darlene tilted her head, genuinely intrigued. "And Oliver? Did you connect with him?" Ava shrugged. "He was fine. Super sweet, but it just didn't click for me. I guess I wasn't in the right headspace." Her mother nodded sympathetically, then walked over to drape a light blanket around Ava's shoulders. "Don't torture yourself about it," she said softly. "Things happen in life that we can't predict. The right people have a way of showing up again when they're meant to." Ava offered a faint smile, though the random stranger's face still flickered in her memory. His quiet acceptance of her mix-up had left an imprint, a sense that he was someone extraordinary in his own subtle way. As she considered this, she sensed a small pang of regret that she had bolted so quickly without even learning his name. "Maybe," Ava replied, not entirely convinced. "For now, though, I think I'm just going to focus on saving money. The diner has extra shifts available this month, and I want to see if I can start building up a fund for some classes at the local art institute. It's my dream, you know." Darlene's eyes sparkled with pride. "I do know, honey, and I believe in you. Your dad would be so proud of how you've kept his passion alive." Despite the whirlwind of conflicting emotions, Ava felt comfort in her mother's reassurance. She leaned back against the couch, the soft hum of the city outside reminding her that tomorrow was another day, another opportunity. Yet in the quiet moments before she drifted off to a restless sleep, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever see that mysterious man from Candelara again. Damien stared out from his corner office, high atop the glimmering skylines of Crown City, tapping his pen softly on a stack of documents he had been meaning to review. The walls around him were sleek glass, the furniture minimalistic and modern, and the entire space exuded an air of success. Yet inside, Damien felt strangely unsettled. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl who had accidentally introduced herself at the restaurant, believing him to be someone else. It wasn't that no one ever approached him, far from it. His position as the CEO of Regality Solutions, a cutting-edge tech company that had skyrocketed to success in the last 5 years, made him a person of note in certain circles. But those interactions were usually steeped in corporate politeness or veiled interest in his fortune. Rarely, if ever, did anyone treat him like an ordinary guy. And that night at Candelara, Ava had done exactly that, talking about her daily life and passions, as if she had no idea of his status. In fact, she hadn't. She thought he was someone else entirely. He recalled her warm, open smile, the nervous way she admitted her dreams and struggles. She'd shown him genuine vulnerability, the kind no one ever revealed to a billionaire. Damien found himself longing to experience that sincerity again. He had been ready to clarify the situation within the first few minutes, but when her phone buzzed and he realized the real confusion, it was already too late. She had fled in embarrassment. "Damien?" came a voice from the door. It was Marissa, his impeccably organized assistant, who had been with him since the early days of Regality Solutions. She was holding a clipboard against her chest, eyebrows raised in polite concern. "You haven't answered the last 2 emails I sent. Is something the matter?" He dragged his thoughts back to the present, setting down his pen. "Sorry, Marissa. Just a bit distracted." "That's obvious," she said gently, stepping into the office. "Let me guess. Something personal?" Damien hesitated. He usually kept personal matters far from the professional realm, but he needed to talk about it. "I met someone by accident the other night. She doesn't know who I am, and it was refreshing." Marissa blinked. "She doesn't know you're the Damien Carlisle? The man who's on the cover of Innovate Today magazine this month?" He shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "No. She thought I was a blind date named Oliver, and by the time I realized the confusion, I didn't correct her right away. Then the real Oliver texted, and she ran off in mortification." Marissa gave him a thoughtful look. "And you want to find her, don't you?" Damien nodded. "I do, but I have no clue how. I don't even know her last name. Just that her first name is Ava, and she's an artist who works as a waitress. There must be 100 diners in Crown City, if not more." Marissa took a moment, scanning her mental resources. "Well, if you're really serious, I can discreetly ask around, but I suggest you proceed carefully. The last thing you want is for her to think you're stalking her." He sighed. "I know, but if I can just talk to her once more, properly, without the confusion, I have a feeling we could have something real." Marissa tilted her head in sympathy. "All right, I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, I'd suggest you focus on your upcoming commitments. You have that charity event next week for the Crown City Youth Fund." Damien nodded. "Right. Thanks, Marissa." As she stepped out, he returned his gaze to the city lights. He was a man used to having the resources to find or buy almost anything. Yet here he was, at a complete loss over a girl named Ava who had quietly stolen his attention by thinking he was someone else entirely. The following week, Ava juggled extra shifts at the diner, her feet aching after each long day. Margot's corner was bustling with office workers in the mornings, families in the afternoons, and the occasional group of students or night owls in the late evenings. Ava found herself in a daze for much of that time, replaying the night at Candelara in her mind, wishing she could undo the embarrassment. Every time she thought of how easily she had assumed that impeccably dressed man was Oliver, she cringed all over again. Her friend Layla, who also worked part-time at the diner when her schedule allowed, finally cornered her one quiet afternoon. They stood behind the counter, wiping down coffee cups and restacking menus. "All right, spill," Layla said, planting her hands on her hips. "I want the unfiltered story of what happened. Liam says his cousin Oliver actually had a decent time, but you seem too distracted." Ava huffed out a breath. "Decent time, sure, but there was zero spark, Layla. You know I don't like forced small talk in the first place, and I felt so mortified after mixing him up with someone else that I couldn't relax." Layla's lips quirked in amusement. "You told me it was a total fiasco, but come on, it can't have been that bad. Did you at least eat a good meal?" Ava laughed in spite of herself. "The food was amazing, but the entire time I kept thinking about the other guy. I have no idea who he is, only that he was good-looking, had a calm vibe, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, until I realized my mistake." She sighed, staring off at the nearly empty dining area. "He didn't sneer at me or call me out for being so stupid. He tried to be nice about it, and then I ran off like a fool." Layla reached out to pat her arm. "Hey, you're not a fool. Maybe it just wasn't the right timing." "It definitely wasn't," Ava conceded, shoulders slumping. "But I can't help being curious about who he really is. He was wearing a suit that must have cost more than I make in 2 months, so maybe he was just some businessman who came in for a meeting. I bet I'll never see him again." Unbeknownst to Ava, however, life had a way of twisting paths together when one least expected it. A few days later, a slender woman with shoulder-length auburn hair walked into Margot's corner. She glanced around with purpose, as though on a mission, before spotting Ava carrying a tray of hot coffee to a table. After Ava set the mugs down, the woman stepped forward, offering a polite smile. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you Ava?" "Yes," Ava replied, blinking in mild surprise. The woman extended a business card. "My name is Marissa. I'm an assistant to someone you met recently. Inadvertently, I should say. He asked me to find you." Ava stared at the card, her heart pounding. Printed on it, in a crisp font, was Marissa Green, personal assistant to Mr. Damien Carlisle, CEO of Regality Solutions. She tried to recall if she'd heard of that company before. The name sounded vaguely familiar from some local business articles. Marissa continued gently. "Damien would like to speak with you again if you're willing. He felt bad about the confusion at the restaurant. He'd like to meet you somewhere more casual, no strings attached." Ava's hand trembled slightly as she took the card. Her mind raced with questions. Damien Carlisle, a CEO? Is that the man I mistook for Oliver? Why is he going through so much trouble just to see me again? She cleared her throat, glancing at Marissa warily. "I'm not sure." "Take your time," Marissa said kindly. "My number's on the back. If you decide you'd like to meet him, call or text me. That's all I ask." With a final polite nod, Marissa turned and walked out, leaving Ava standing in the middle of the diner, heart thudding against her ribcage. Later that evening, after her shift ended, Ava gathered her things from her locker in the back of the diner. She stared at Marissa's business card, reading the print and flipping it over to see the personal phone number. Damien Carlisle. She vaguely recalled a news headline, something about a young tech mogul who had risen to prominence with groundbreaking apps and philanthropic endeavors. If that was indeed the same person, it meant the man at Candelara was more than just a random businessman. He was possibly one of the most influential names in Crown City's burgeoning tech scene. Layla, who was finishing up her own shift, noticed Ava's preoccupied expression. "Are you okay?" she asked, sliding on her jacket. "You've been quiet since that woman left." Ava sighed, holding the card between her fingers. "Apparently the man I sat with by accident is some CEO named Damien Carlisle. He had his assistant track me down. Layla's jaw dropped slightly. Seriously? I've heard of him. Liam's boss mentioned his name a few times. Something about him being a major donor to local charities. Why would he go to such lengths to find you? That's what I can't figure out, Ava admitted, rubbing the back of her neck. He says he wants to talk. Maybe he's just worried I'll sue him for emotional distress or something, she joked half-heartedly, but deep down she was alarmed. Why would a billionaire bother seeking out a broke waitress he met by mistake? Once home, Ava retreated to her bedroom, a small space that doubled as her art studio. The corner was crowded with half-finished sketches and a foldable easel. She tossed her bag onto the bed and set the business card on her desk. Turning on her lamp, she scanned a few news articles on her phone about Damien Carlisle. Each headline portrayed him as a reserved but brilliant entrepreneur who had changed the tech landscape with innovative mobile security software. There were also pictures of him at various galas and charity events, always impeccably dressed, often with different socialites or business associates on his arm. Ava exhaled slowly, her chest tight. This is way out of my league, she thought. I'm just a waitress with overdue bills who shares a cramped apartment with my sick mom. There's no reason for me to step into his world, or for him to step into mine. Yet something in her heart insisted that this was not just about the difference in their social status. She remembered how she had felt sitting across from him, oddly comfortable and able to talk freely. Even though it had lasted only a few minutes, she sensed a genuine interest in his eyes. Could that have all been in my imagination? She wondered. Before she could second-guess herself, she picked up her phone and typed out a text to the number on Marissa's card. Hi, this is Ava. I got your card. I'll meet Damien, but only if we do it somewhere casual, like a coffee shop. Let me know. Hi, this is Ava. I got your card. I'll meet Damien, but only if we do it somewhere casual, like a coffee shop. Let me know. Hi, this is Ava. I got your card. I'll meet Damien, but only if we do it somewhere casual, like a coffee shop. Let me know. She hit send, her heart skipping a beat. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed in her hand. This is Marissa. Thank you for responding. Coffee sounds perfect. Damien will meet you at Nordell's Scaife, on Oak Street, tomorrow at 2 p.m. If that works for you, this is Marissa. Thank you for responding. Coffee sounds perfect. Damien will meet you at Nordell's Cafe on Oak Street, tomorrow at 2 p.m. If that works for you. This is Marissa. Thank you for responding. Coffee sounds perfect. Damien will meet you at Nordell's Scaife, on Oak Street, tomorrow at 2 p.m. If that works for you. Yes, 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 Ava typed back, feeling both apprehensive and oddly excited. As she set her phone down, she cast a glance at the old photograph of her father on her desk, him smiling next to one of his art pieces. Dad, I'm about to walk into something I don't understand. Wish me luck. Nordell's Cafe was a cozy, family-owned spot famous for its aromatic roasted blends and homemade pastries. Unlike the posh atmosphere of Candelara, Nordell's had worn wooden floors, mismatched tables, and a bright chalkboard menu. A light indie music track floated through the air, mixing pleasantly with the hiss of the espresso machine. When Ava entered, she instantly felt more at ease. At least I'm on familiar territory, she told herself. She spotted Damien sitting at a corner table near the back. He was dressed far more casually than the first time she had seen him. Dark jeans and a well-fitted sweater, no tie or blazer in sight. Despite the simpler attire, he still carried himself with a quiet confidence that was hard to miss. Ava approached cautiously, clutching the strap of her purse. Damien? She ventured, her heart tapping a faster rhythm. He stood up, offering a polite, slightly nervous smile. Ava, thank you for coming. He gestured to the seat across from him, and she sat, placing her phone on the table just in case she needed a quick escape. The silence stretched for a beat before Damien cleared his throat. I'm really grateful you agreed to meet. First of all, I owe you an apology. I should have told you right away at Candelara that you had the wrong table. I'm sorry I didn't. Ava fiddled with a napkin, trying to mask her nervousness with a casual shrug. It's fine. Honestly, I feel like I should apologize for just assuming you were someone else and then running out. He let out a soft chuckle. You don't owe me an apology for that. Anyone would have been embarrassed. I'm just glad you're willing to hear me out now. Their conversation paused as a cheerful barista stopped by to take their orders. Ava asked for a vanilla latte, Damien a black coffee. Once the barista left, he leaned slightly forward, arms resting on the table. I don't want to make this weird, he began slowly, but I found our conversation that night really refreshing. You spoke to me like a normal person, not the CEO of Regality Solutions. I never have that experience. People usually treat me differently. Ava nodded. I can understand that, I guess. But I had no idea who you were, so to me you were just the quiet guy in the suit who turned out not to be my blind date. Damien laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. Exactly. That's why it was so nice. You were open and honest, and it made me realize how guarded my life has become. After you left, I couldn't get you out of my head. I tried to figure out how to see you again. Hence, my assistant. Marissa, Ava supplied, and he nodded. Right. I admit it's not something I do lightly, but I wanted a chance to talk without all the confusion. He studied her face as if trying to gauge her reaction. Ava inhaled, her mind swirling with doubts. She could see sincerity in his eyes, yet an underlying question tugged at her. Why me? She was just a waitress with a passion for sketching, drowning in real-life responsibilities. Okay, she said, clasping her hands together. We're talking now. Where do we go from here? Their drinks arrived, allowing Damien a moment to gather his thoughts. He took a sip of coffee. I'd like to get to know you better, if you're willing. Maybe we could hang out in normal places, do normal things. I know that's probably a strange request coming from someone whose face you've seen in business articles. Ava parted her lips to reply, but paused, uncertain. A blend of curiosity and caution roiled within her. You want to just hang out like regular people? Damien offered a gentle smile. Yes, exactly. No suits, no fancy dinners unless you want them. Just you and me, seeing if this is something real or just a weird coincidence. She glanced at the latte in her hands, steam curling upward. I'm open to that, she said softly. But please don't lie to me. I've had enough disappointment to last a lifetime. His gaze softened. I promise, no lies, no pretenses, just me, Damien. Over the next few weeks, Ava found herself slowly drawn into Damien's orbit, but not in the extravagant way she might have feared. Their dates were as ordinary as they could manage, grabbing street tacos from a local food truck, strolling through the city park at twilight, or meeting up at the small community art center to watch a local painting demonstration. Despite the stark contrasts in their daily lives, they discovered surprising commonalities. Damien revealed that he had once been a shy computer geek, an introvert who spent countless hours coding in his college dorm. He talked about the mentors who pushed him to pitch his first startup idea, and how the early investors' interest turned into a whirlwind of success that caught him off guard. I barely had time to figure out who I was before people started labeling me a tech prodigy, he admitted one afternoon as they sat on a bench, watching kids feed ducks in a pond. Ava, for her part, opened up about how her father had instilled a love for art in her from a young age. She described the way she'd watch him paint, mesmerizing strokes capturing everyday beauty. After he passed away, her mother struggled to keep them afloat, forcing Ava to bury her artistic dreams for a time. She took on job after job, pushing her creative side into the margins of her life. It was like letting a part of me go dormant, she said quietly, hugging her sketchbook to her chest. But I've started coming back to it, especially after you mentioned how important it is to keep something for yourself, something that makes you feel alive. Those words struck Damien deeply. With every conversation, he grew more convinced that what he felt for Ava wasn't just a passing fascination. She was genuine, unguarded, and warm, a world apart from the polished socialites he'd encountered at high-profile galas. She treated him like a person, not a CEO or a bank account. One mild autumn evening, he walked her home from a coffee date. They paused outside the modest apartment building, chipped paint visible under the buzzing fluorescent hallway lights. Ava fiddled with her keys, casting a sideways glance at Damien's earnest face. I know my place is Well, it's not exactly the penthouse you're probably used to, she joked, trying to downplay her self-consciousness. Damien shook his head. Hey, I've lived in tiny dorm rooms and crappy first apartments. Besides, a home is about the people, not the size or cost. Ava felt a surge of gratitude for his understanding. Thanks, sometimes I worry about how different our lives are. I mean, you. He reached for her hand, gently squeezing it. I'm just Damien when I'm with you. That's enough for me, if it's enough for you. Her heart fluttered at the sincerity in his eyes. She nodded and leaned in to give him a brief, shy kiss on the cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for letting me be myself. As she ascended the stairs to her apartment, Ava couldn't wipe the small smile off her face. The door creaked as she entered to find her mother resting on the couch, crocheting a blanket. Darlene looked up, noticing the dreamy expression on her daughter's face. Someone had a good evening? Darlene teased gently. Ava set down her purse. Yeah, it was. Nice, she admitted, cheeks flushing slightly. She wasn't sure she was ready to tell her mother the full story, especially not about Damien's identity. But she knew that for the first time in a long time, a spark of hope was lighting up her life. Despite the growing warmth between them, a seed of worry sprouted in Ava's mind. She knew the precariousness of her own life situation. Her mother's medical bills continued to mount, her hours at the diner fluctuated, and her dream of studying art seemed more distant than ever. Even if Damien never flaunted his wealth or status, that difference loomed like a silent presence. I don't want him to feel obligated to fix my problems, she often told herself, though she occasionally caught flickers of concern in his eyes whenever he saw the reality of her financial struggles. Then came the night she discovered that her mother's health insurance had quietly lapsed. She only found out when a particularly large hospital bill arrived, summoning an astronomical figure that made Ava's stomach twist into knots. Darlene had been too proud to bring it up, hoping to secure a new insurance plan on her own before Ava noticed. The result was a tearful confrontation in the living room, with Ava pleading for honesty and Darlene apologizing for her stubbornness. It was near midnight when Ava, feeling emotionally drained, texted Damien. Hey, are you awake? I'm sorry to bother you so late. Hey, are you awake? I'm sorry to bother you so late. Hey, are you awake? I'm sorry to bother you so late. She half expected him not to respond until morning, but within minutes her phone buzzed. I'm awake. Everything okay? I'm awake. Everything okay? I'm awake. Everything okay? Instead of typing back a long explanation, Ava sent a quick note asking if he could talk. His immediate response, of course. Call me. Of course, call me. Of course. Call me. She slipped out of the apartment building to avoid waking her mother and sat on the front stoop, phone pressed to her ear as she recounted the situation in hushed tones. Damien listened intently, not interrupting, until she finally paused, her voice trembling from the strain of holding back tears. I'm sorry, she muttered into the phone. I know you're not my personal problem solver. I just had to tell someone, and you're the only one I could think of. She heard him sigh softly. Ava, don't apologize, I'm here. You don't have to go through this alone. The sincerity in his words nearly broke her composure. She wiped at her damp eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I'm just so scared we're going to lose everything if Mom can't get the treatment she needs. Damien's voice was gentle but firm. We'll figure something out. Let's explore the options calmly, step by step. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow during your break? I know people in the health insurance world. Maybe I can help find a better plan for your mom. Immediately, Ava's guard went up. The last thing she wanted was to feel like a charity case. I appreciate the offer, but I don't want you to pay for anything, she said quickly. I couldn't accept that. He paused a moment, then replied, I'm not just throwing money at you, Ava. I'm offering resources and connections. Let me at least see if I can point you toward a program or something you might not know about. You're an amazing woman, and your mother raised you to be independent, but that doesn't mean you have to reject help. Ava sat there in the cool night air, staring at the flickering streetlight. She realized her sense of pride was warring with her practicality. Darlene's well-being was at stake, and refusing guidance out of stubbornness would be foolish. Finally, she nodded to herself. "Okay," she said quietly. "I can meet you. Thank you for being there." Damien's relief was palpable through the phone. "Anytime. And please, get some rest, Ava. You don't have to carry all this alone anymore." The next day, Ava arrived at Regality Solutions for the first time. The building was an architectural marvel of steel and glass, each reflective panel shining in the midday sun. She felt out of place the moment she stepped into the polished marble lobby, her practical sneakers squeaking slightly against the gleaming floor. Business people, sharply dressed in suits and pencil skirts, streamed past with purposeful strides, holding expensive leather briefcases or tapping furiously on smartphones. Marissa greeted her with a friendly wave at the reception desk and guided her to a private elevator that required a key card to access the executive floors. In the elevator's mirrored surface, Ava caught sight of her reflection and had a moment of self-consciousness. She wore a simple blouse, jeans, and a lightweight jacket, the nicest clothes she could manage without looking like she was trying too hard. "Here goes nothing," she thought, as the elevator dinged to a stop. Damien's office suite was a spacious area that opened onto panoramic views of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed Crown City's skyline, while a plush white sofa and minimalist coffee table offered a more casual meeting space. A few paces away, a large modern desk held multiple screens displaying lines of code, business charts, and email windows. He rose from behind the desk as she entered, his expression brightening. "Ava," he said, crossing the room. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder in greeting, then motioned toward the sofa. "Thanks for coming. Please make yourself comfortable." She perched on the edge of the sofa, trying to quell the nerves churning her stomach. "Thanks for seeing me. I'm sorry if this is a hassle." He shook his head firmly. "Stop apologizing. You're not a hassle. I asked you to come." Marissa followed them in, holding a manila folder. She placed it on the coffee table and sat in a nearby chair. "I made some calls to a friend who works in healthcare advocacy," she explained. "He provided a list of organizations and plans that might suit your mother's situation better than standard insurance, especially if her illness qualifies for certain types of assistance." Ava swallowed hard, flipping through the paperwork. Terms like subsidized care and sliding scale leapt out at her. She had no idea such options even existed. A surge of gratitude, mixed with relief, welled up. This is more than I ever expected. Thank you," she murmured, lifting her eyes to meet Damien's. He offered a warm smile. "I'm happy we could help. I know it's overwhelming, but Marissa can walk you through the specifics." Marissa nodded. "Absolutely. And I'm no stranger to complicated paperwork." She paused, adding gently, "Just to be clear, there's no obligation here. We're not asking for anything in return." Hearing that, Ava felt a weight slide from her shoulders. She realized she had been unconsciously bracing herself for some kind of catch. "Thank you truly," she repeated, her voice a little shaky with emotion. Damien waited for Marissa to wrap up the overview before suggesting they head out for a quick lunch. He guided Ava to a nearby cafe that was popular among the office staff, a relaxed space with cozy booths and an array of sandwiches on chalkboard menus. Settling into a booth, he looked at her earnestly. "Are you feeling a bit better?" She nodded, stirring her iced tea. "I am. I'll need to go over these documents in detail, but at least I know there's a pathway. That's all I want, for you not to feel like the ground is caving in under your feet," Damien said, sincerity shining in his gaze. "I understand what it's like to face big obstacles. Mine were mostly business-related, but the pressure can be suffocating." Ava mustered a small smile. "It does help having someone in my corner. I'm not used to it." He reached across the table and gently rested his hand over hers. "Then let's change that." Though Ava still felt a swirl of apprehension about her mom, her future, and the growing affection she felt for this man, she couldn't deny the warmth blossoming in her chest at his words. Maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to hope for something good in all this. Unbeknownst to Ava, a public charity gala was looming on Damien's calendar, a major event to benefit the Crown City Youth Fund. It was the sort of black tie affair that always made him feel slightly on display. In the past, he might have brought a date from his business circles or gone solo to keep things simple. But now, He found himself wanting Ava to be part of his life in every sense, though he also worried it might overwhelm her. Eventually, after much deliberation, he decided to invite her, while making it crystal clear that her attendance was entirely optional. One evening, after walking her home post-dinner at a local Thai place, he broached the subject. "There's this event I have next week," Damien began, shuffling awkwardly. "A formal gala. I'm a principal donor, so I usually make an appearance. I'd love for you to come as my guest, but please don't feel pressured." Ava paused, her key in the lock of her apartment building's front door. "A gala?" she echoed, a tinge of anxiety in her voice. She pictured swanky ball gowns, diamond necklaces, and photographers snapping pictures of wealthy patrons. She didn't own anything remotely elegant enough for that crowd. Damien hurried to reassure her. "You don't have to say yes. I just want you to know I'm not ashamed of you, or hiding you. I want you there if you're comfortable." Her heart clenched with mixed emotions: gratitude, self-consciousness, fear. After a moment, she admitted, "I've never been to anything like that. I don't even know if I'd fit in." Gently, he took her hand. "If you decide to come, you'll fit in just by being yourself. But it's your call. I'll support whatever makes you feel at ease." Ava found herself saying yes, though her stomach twisted with nerves as soon as the word left her lips. That night, she confided in her mother, who sat in her usual spot on the couch, crocheting a scarf. "A gala? That's exciting," Darlene said, eyes lighting up. Ava groaned, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "Mom, I have nothing to wear, and we can't afford a fancy gown right now. It's just going to be more obvious that I'm out of place." Darlene set the yarn aside and met her daughter's troubled gaze. "Ava, you deserve happiness. If this man wants you by his side, go and enjoy yourself. And as for a dress, I've got an idea." It turned out that one of Darlene's old friends from church ran a small boutique that specialized in renting out gently used formal wear. Within a few days, Ava had found a long, midnight blue gown that fit her curves and didn't break the bank. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, hardly recognizing her reflection. The soft fabric flowed elegantly, and with a bit of minimal jewelry and a pair of borrowed heels from Layla, she looked, well, almost the part. When Damien arrived to pick her up, he was speechless for a moment, taking in how the dress complemented her dark hair and the delicate glimmer in her eyes. "You look incredible," he said softly, offering his arm. Ava's cheeks flamed. "I feel like I'm impersonating someone else," she admitted, laughing nervously. His expression softened with affection. "I only see you, Ava, and I'm honored to have you on my arm tonight." They rode to the venue in a sleek town car. Upon arrival, Ava's trepidation returned tenfold. The gala was hosted at a grand art museum downtown, its steps crowded with paparazzi flashes and elegantly dressed attendees. A valet opened the car door and Damien helped her step out. Instantly, a wave of camera clicks sounded. Ava's heart thundered, but she steadied herself, clinging to Damien's supportive presence. Inside the museum's towering atrium, classical music played softly as servers in crisp uniforms offered champagne flutes to arriving guests. Giant banners hung from the mezzanine balconies, displaying the logo of the Crown City Youth Fund. A hush of sophistication permeated the air, making Ava hyper-aware of every shift of fabric against her skin. Yet, she also noticed the exquisite artwork lining the walls. Her artistic side momentarily outshone her nerves, her gaze drifting to the vibrant paintings and sculptures illuminated under subtle gallery lights. Damien squeezed her hand. "Are you okay?" he murmured, leaning in so she could hear him over the gentle music. She exhaled, nodding slightly. "Yes, just taking it all in." He guided her through the mingling crowd. Various guests stopped to greet him, each addressing him as Mr. Carlyle or Damien, with the kind of respect reserved for a key benefactor. Ava tried not to shrink under their inquisitive gazes, especially when they glanced at her questioningly, wondering who she was. But to his credit, Damien introduced her as his friend and companion for the evening, never faltering or showing any sign of discomfort. While sipping on a modest flute of champagne, her first time trying it, Ava found herself near an ornate marble staircase. She was examining the details of a grand painting that depicted an old Victorian street scene. Suddenly, a wave of applause rippled through the crowd, and a voice echoed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Damien Carlisle, our principal patron for tonight's event. A hush fell, and Damien, who had been standing at Ava's side, reluctantly stepped forward to address the crowd. He offered her a reassuring glance before making his way onto the small stage area. Ava watched from a respectful distance as he delivered a brief, heartfelt speech about the importance of supporting underprivileged youth. He spoke eloquently about how creativity and opportunity could unlock a child's future, and how he believed in fostering the talents of the next generation, words that resonated deeply with Ava, who had grown up with limited means but boundless dreams. Her heart swelled with pride at his sincerity. This wasn't some hollow PR move. She could tell he genuinely cared. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. He descended the stage, returned to her side, and offered a sheepish smile. "I hate public speaking," he confessed under his breath. "You did great," Ava whispered, squeezing his arm gently. They strolled around, sampling a few hors d'oeuvres from passing trays. The tension in Ava's shoulders began to ease, replaced by a sense of awe at the elegance surrounding her. She even found herself chatting with a few other donors who recognized her as Damien's date, but were friendly enough. That sense of cautious delight evaporated when the evening's MC suddenly made an announcement about a special guest. "We're honored tonight to be joined by a local celebrity in the tech world, Mr. Jarrett Hayes, who just arrived." A murmur of excitement swept through the crowd. Ava recognized the name from tech headlines. Jarrett Hayes was a rival entrepreneur in the same field as Damien. The energy in the room changed as Jarrett strutted in with a confident smile. She noticed the flicker of tension on Damien's face. Jarrett wasted no time crossing the floor to greet Damien, the two men exchanging pleasantries with the kind of forced politeness that hinted at deeper rivalry. He cast a glance at Ava, a curious gleam in his eyes. "And you must be—" Damien maintained composure. "Jarrett, this is Ava. She's an artist and my companion this evening." Jarrett's gaze lingered a second longer. "Delightful," he said, voice smooth but slightly condescending. "Damien, always a pleasure." With that, he vanished into the crowd, leaving Ava unsettled by the undercurrent of tension. Damien gently guided her to a quieter section near the sculptures. "Sorry about him," he muttered. "He's complicated." Ava offered a supportive nod. "I can handle complicated." Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was tiptoeing into a world of power plays and hidden agendas. And for the first time that evening, she questioned whether her presence might end up causing Damien more trouble than it was worth. A short while later, the MC announced that the charity auction portion of the gala was about to begin in a cordoned-off gallery. Damien led Ava through the throng, his hand securely around hers. The gallery's walls were adorned with a mixture of modern and classical paintings, each bearing a small plaque indicating the minimum bid to benefit the Crown City Youth Fund. People took their seats in rows of plush chairs, and a charismatic auctioneer took the podium. At first, Ava merely observed with curious amazement as wealthy attendees raised their paddles to bid on sculptures, curated gift baskets, and exclusive tickets to events. The sums escalated quickly, reaching thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. Her heart pounded at the sheer magnitude of money being exchanged. Yet she felt proud too. These funds would help children who needed a shot at a better future. As the auction progressed, the next item was unveiled with theatrical flair. A set of painting lessons with a renowned artist, plus a small personal gallery space in a local community center. Ava's eyes lit up at the description. It was the kind of opportunity she had only dreamed about, a stepping stone for someone serious about pursuing art but lacking resources. Her pulse quickened as the bidding started at a modest figure, then inched upward. She found herself unconsciously gripping Damien's arm. Her mind wandered, imagining what it would be like to take those lessons and display her art in a real gallery, even if it was just a small local space. That was the moment Ava realized how deeply she wanted that kind of exposure, that chance to grow. Damien leaned closer to her. "You should go for it," he whispered, noticing her rapt attention on the stage. She let out a shaky laugh. "Are you kidding? I can't afford to bid on something like that. I'm barely paying rent right now." He frowned thoughtfully. Ava, you know I'd help if... She cut him off gently, placing a hand on his chest. Damien, I can't let you bankroll my dreams. That has to come from me. He squeezed her fingers. I respect that, he said quietly, though she saw a hint of sadness in his eyes, as if he wished he could solve every struggle she faced. Soon after, the item sold for a figure Ava could never have matched. She offered the winner a polite smile from across the room, swallowing the small pang of disappointment. Even so, she felt Damien's hand warm against her own, silently encouraging her. Once the auction wrapped up, the night started to wind down. Donors and guests meandered through the museum halls, chatting and congratulating each other on the funds raised. Ava excused herself for a moment to admire one of the quieter exhibits, a series of large canvases depicting surreal landscapes. She studied the brushstrokes, losing herself in the art. That was when she overheard a pair of attendees talking in hushed, gossipy tones a short distance away. "Did you see who Damien Carlyle brought tonight?" whispered one. "She's pretty, but she's obviously not from his usual crowd." "I heard she's just a waitress," the other replied with a sniff. "Let's see how long that lasts. You know how these wealthy men like a Cinderella story until reality sets in." Their words sliced through Ava's chest like shards of ice. She stood rooted to the spot, heart pounding, not sure if she wanted to confront them or flee. She hated that they saw her as some charity case or novelty, exactly what she'd feared. Maybe they're right, she thought anxiously. What if I really don't belong here? Before Ava could decide what to do, Damien appeared at her side, gently touching her elbow. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing her tense posture. She swallowed hard, forcing a small nod. She didn't want to make a scene or dampen the evening for him, especially after the event had gone so well. "Yeah, I'm fine," she murmured, though her voice wavered. His brow furrowed, searching her face as if he sensed her distress. "You sure?" She mustered a smile that felt brittle. "Just seeing more art," she managed. "We can go if you like. It's getting late." Reluctantly, Damien escorted her out, and they caught a ride home in thoughtful silence. As they approached her apartment building, she turned to him, wrestling with the emotions that had been stewing inside her. "Damien, tonight was wonderful, and I'm proud of what you do for charity," she said, voice quiet. "But I also realized just how different our worlds are. I heard people talking about me." His jaw tightened. "They have no right." "I know," she interrupted gently, "but that doesn't stop them. I just don't want to be an embarrassment to you." He looked genuinely pained by her words. "You're not. You never could be." He paused, exhaling a heavy breath. "I can't pretend there isn't a gap between us, but I believe we can bridge it if we try. I don't care what people say, Ava." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, though she blinked them back. "I appreciate that, I really do." She gazed up at the worn steps leading to her apartment. "I just need a little time to think about everything." Damien's face clouded with worry, but he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." In the days that followed, Ava wrestled with her insecurities. She continued to see Damien, but she could feel a subtle distance growing, one rooted not in his actions but in her own internal fears. Layla noticed her friend's turmoil, eventually sitting Ava down in the diner's back room. "Look," she said bluntly, "I know you heard some people talking trash at that gala, but you have to decide if their opinions matter more than what you have with Damien." Ava fiddled with the corner of a paper napkin. "I'm just scared, Layla. Everything with him is so big, and I'm so small." Layla snorted. "That's ridiculous. You're talented, kind, and you have more heart than anyone I know. You don't need to stand in his shadow. Stand beside him. If people can't handle it, that's their problem." Ava let her friend's words sink in. She realized that perhaps she was clinging to doubts because it felt safer than embracing the unknown. But in doing so, she risked losing the best thing that had ever happened to her. Matters came to a head at another high-profile charity event a few weeks later, one that Ava had no idea Damien was attending. She only volunteered there to help set up auction items for a local youth arts program, ironically an area she was passionate about. She was pinning labels onto donated art pieces when she heard a sudden commotion, people applauding as the major benefactor of the event arrived. When she turned, she froze. There was Damien, stepping into the grand ballroom, greeted by the organizer who introduced him to the crowd. She caught sight of him scanning the room, and for a moment their eyes locked. A startled flicker of recognition passed across his face. The organizer quickly announced, "Our esteemed guest of honor, Mr. Damien Carlyle, whose generosity made this evening possible." Thunderous applause echoed, but the only sound Ava heard was the drumming of her own pulse. She slowly realized she was among a cluster of volunteers who were staring at her curiously, wondering why this wealthy man had singled her out with his gaze. Before she could slip away, he made his way toward her. "Ava," he said quietly, searching her expression. She swallowed, forcing a light laugh that cracked under tension. "I didn't expect to see you here." He exhaled, a swirl of emotions lighting his eyes, relief, longing, maybe even a hint of fear. "I'm not stalking you, I promise," he said, drawing a small smile from her. "I was invited weeks ago, but I'm glad we're both here." A hush fell as the organizer invited Damien to address the attendees. He seemed reluctant to pull away from Ava, but eventually stepped up to the podium. His words about supporting youth in the arts and giving back to the community resonated strongly with her. She recalled their countless conversations about bridging gaps, about stepping beyond one's comfort zone to help others. Once the formalities ended, she mustered courage and approached him as the crowd dispersed to mingle. "Damien," she began, voice trembling with emotion, "I'm done letting people's judgments scare me. I want to be with you no matter what that looks like, if you'll still have me." He blinked, relief and joy mingling on his features. "Of course I will," he replied, pulling her into a discreet yet heartfelt embrace. "That's all I've wanted from the moment you mistook me for Oliver at the restaurant." Tears shimmered in Ava's eyes as she let the tension melt away, replaced by warmth and conviction. They stood there, in the midst of a bustling charity gala, volunteers and patrons swirling around them. But for a moment, it felt like their own quiet corner of the world, one where judgments and social divides ceased to matter, eclipsed by the simple truth that they had found something real in each other. And though life would undoubtedly continue to throw obstacles and gossip in their path, they both understood that the most extraordinary connections often begin in the most unexpected ways, even at the wrong table on a blind date gone awry.